Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Weckerly, and welcome to the Ready Living podcast, where each episode is designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to create the life you want. Thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe for free on your favorite platform. My guest today is Rachel Happe, the founder of Engaged Organizations, where she works to bring connection, joy, and trust to workplaces by building community-centric cultures. Before Engaged Organizations, she co-founded the Community Roundtable in 2009, where she published groundbreaking research that documented the discipline and importance of fostering community-centric cultures. Her clients included BASF, Amex, Microsoft, and the World Bank Group, among others. Rachel's writing has been published in Harvard Business Review, CMS Wire, and Information Week, and she's the author of Becoming Hybrid, a team collaboration handbook. Welcome, Rachel.
Nice to be here.
I know you've spent over 2 decades digging into what makes organizations and communities truly successful. And one of the things you predicted for 2025 is that organizations will have to grapple with meaning. What does it mean to grapple with meaning?
So many of us go to work and we have a list of tasks or a project plan, and we go along and then we do that project plan, and we have this whole conversation about meetings have to be efficient, and so we follow agendas, and we never actually have conversation about why are we doing this? Is this the thing we should be doing? And as technology takes over, all the simple decisions are made by technology. The things technology can't figure out is, does it matter? Does it matter is a complex question. It's a lot more nuanced than, is this the right decision? There might be many good decisions and a few right decisions. And so then how do you figure out what's the best good decision? And one thing organizations rarely do is figure out which one their employees are most enthusiastic about. And that matters because it reduces friction. It makes people dig in because they're curious, or it matters to them for whatever reason, maybe many reasons. Human energy piece is never part of the equations. And I think emotions are data. They're telling us something that we can't articulate yet. Part of the problem is the way we think about human value. At least systemically, the way the system, the governance thinks about humans is their ability or capacity to produce. But now that technology has robots and AI, it can produce a lot more stuff. So the conversation is like, oh, AI can summarize things. AI can translate, transform, like all of this stuff that humans used to do. And we've missed the whole piece about communities and people activating each other. At the end of the day, you have to have a customer who wants to buy your thing, and it has to mean something to them. And the more excited they are, the more they trust you, the more likely they are to buy your thing. Humans are the only things that can create meaning for other humans, or together we collaborate to create meaning.
Well, related to that, I've seen that on social media and in your work, you're pretty critical about the way many organizations and businesses are run, and have spoken out about how companies treat employees as a cost on the balance sheet rather than an asset.
The first large organizations that needed balance sheets or needed to account for things were plantations that had enslaved workers. And the reason they needed to account for the performance and the cost and all of that is, one, they were buying and selling slaves, but also they had absentee owners. And the reason we report quarterly is because that was the shipping schedule back to England. So the whole foundation of how we organize ourselves is toxic. And people used to be on the asset side of the balance sheet when we considered them owned assets. When we couldn't do that anymore, we wiped them off and didn't look back.
You're writing a book called Control is for Amateurs, and that's a great title, by the way. So in a post on your Substack of the same name, you write that our institutions are run like machines. They're optimized for control, but in doing so, they end up squeezing out our humanity.
The premise of the book is the governance of our organizations are built as an industrial system, mechanistic economic, and we completely lack governance for human systems. The problem is humans are an organic system and everything else is a mechanistic or financial system. In the US, where there's really not a safety net, they need their job, they need their health care. They're going to be compliant because they can't risk losing their job, but it doesn't mean they're going to get pom-poms on. It doesn't even mean they're going to push very hard. There's a lot of passive non-compliance, and just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If people don't have feedback for me, that indicates there's something wrong. Not necessarily with what I did, but they are experiencing a system that has not supported them in some way. I see that as a risk. Good governance is a trellis, not a cage. And it's not a trash dump either. But I also say that perfection is the enemy of engagement. We really need to learn how to leave people well, because when you leave people well and let them make decisions and not take that as a personal affront, they will come back to you. They trust you then. Actually, it's one of the strongest ways to build trust is to let people say no. That stuff matters. And we don't think about that. We definitely don't think about that in organizations. We are sacrificing excellence for reliability and average performance. So the people who thrive in organizations are average. We have control that limits the downside, but it also limits the excellence.
I know on Blue Sky, you recently wrote that any institution that doesn't have a purpose beyond control over resources will eventually collapse under the weight of its own success. What do you mean by that?
Because it's in an unfettered capitalist system, it wants to grow profits, it wants to grow revenue beyond the capacity of the market to absorb it. It will keep driving towards that. So we see this in Facebook. Every time I open Facebook, there are more ads or posts from groups that I have no affiliation with than there are from my friends. They have to grow. They have to be more profitable. They're destroying the quality of their service to pump short-term revenue and profit.
What I found, a lot of the people that I know on Facebook are this close to leaving Facebook for that very reason, because their feed is becoming no longer valuable to them.
It's a perfect example of shooting yourself in the foot. There's no idea in American capitalism of enough. Why is it not enough to just make good profits?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is one of my issues too. Yeah.
It's not healthy. And actually, I've thought a lot about some of these very, very wealthy individuals. I heard the story on NPR years ago about a financial manager who did very high net worth individuals. And it's almost impossible not to become paranoid. They literally don't feel like they can have conversations with people that indicate any kind of vulnerability because they're afraid they're going to be taken advantage of.
You're talking about capitalism here, and as income inequality grows in the United States, it raises a key question. When we talk about building engaged communities, where do wages fit into that picture?
If you have a great community strategy, it has two things. It has a shared purpose and it generates shared value, meaning everybody gets value relative to what they put in. And the trick is, which capitalism can't manage to figure out, is that if you share an asset, it has double the value. Zip car, right? Sharing a car turns out much cheaper. And you don't use your car 24/7. So why wouldn't you do that? I think about the civic space a lot. Paris and a lot of cities are doing amazing things. The way people think about public transportation here is grimy. Doesn't have to be. Because we can't share, we're destroying things.
I saw on Blue Sky you referenced the report that came out by Elon University called Being Human in 2023, and the outlook of the report was pretty sobering. They talked about more disconnection, less empathy, and a decline in moral judgment and identity.
One of the things we don't do at work often enough is talk about how we work together and come up with like a collective agreement on when, how, where, what, all of those things. We get straight to the work. It's really easy for toxic patterns to persist. We've been living under an industrial system for so long that our mental model is wrapped up in control. So it's very hard for us to see the white space or another way of looking at things. It's very black and white. It's not helpful at all to collaboration. You get into what I call ping pong conversations where two people can't be right. When I was working in the community space, one of the things that I talked to community managers about a lot and did in some of my workshops was talking about the language of engagement. And often it's women's language because we didn't have control over anything. So we have to be a little more nuanced about sharing our opinions. What that looks like is instead of saying this is that, you say, well, in my experience, I found this is the result of this, or I feel like, or in my opinion, this is. So it's just adding room for somebody else to have an alternate perspective on something.
You raise a really interesting point about the fact that people who historically, or even let's say situationally, feel that they do not have the ability or the power to voice their views, their concerns, their opinions, whatever that may be.
I think men need to understand how to like leave room for other people in their language.
I know you recently talked about all of us collectively needing to stop spectating and instead start participating. What are some tangible things you think people need to do to reclaim a sense of shared civic life? Because in a broader context, we're talking about work, but we're also talking about the importance of work within the civic life framework.
A lot of my professional life, I went off and did my thing and ran around and didn't really get involved civically. And it's not how I grew up. My parents were in some kind of committee meetings like 3 or 4 nights a week. You know, they were always off, like engaging somewhere. There's one piece of that that's a big piece of it. Women have gone to college and gotten into the workforce. We can't have any conversations about any of these other things until we have a conversation about that. And so I did this back of the napkin type calculation about between like 1920 and 2000, how many women were in the workforce versus before. If I made the assumption that each one of them, had they not been working, would have spent an hour a week doing some kind of community engagement and applied the current cost of a professional community manager to that. It's like trillions of dollars every year we're taking out in value from our communities. People don't have time. And so this is like the efficiency busyness culture, like just work and you'll be fine, right? Because technology has allowed us to work all the time. I mean, we didn't have email. So like you had to go home and find something else to do. And things were just slower. That's where you find meaning a lot of the time because you're connecting with the things that matter other than your work. And so the ways we can do that is, I mean, it's as simple as joining a book club. Or one of the things that I've picked up over the last couple of years is I go for a walk with a friend early in the morning, like 6:30 in the morning. We go for like 3-mile walk and talk. And it's really like grounding because you're not in your head. I've started going back to church occasionally. I was sitting there thinking about this and I was like, you know, we're out of practice in reflecting because we don't go to church anymore. For all the other things that church does, if you go every week and sit for an hour in the service and hear somebody talk about how they make sense of something, you reflect with them. And we are what we practice. And so if we never practice reflection, we're not reflective.
You talked about women in the workforce. There was an article that appeared in The Guardian recently that talked about this whole movement that's trying to get women to leave the workforce and have large families and take on very old-fashioned, quote unquote, traditional roles. But I think what we're talking about here is no longer centering our lives around work.
My grandmother didn't work less than me, not by a long shot. She had less control over her work. And if you're not financially compensating them for the work, they have no control. It's about recognizing the value of that work and figuring out the financial model for that. Then, as a woman, I can say, well, caring for children has this value. I either choose to do it myself or I can pay somebody. We don't pay our childcare workers nearly enough.
And I'm thinking back of something you said on LinkedIn where you were talking about analyzing data. And basically, you said that if we haven't done analysis the hard way, we can't see problems the easy way. And so I'm wondering, in a world of sound bites, TikToks, and endless scrolling, how do we rekindle curiosity and critical thinking? How do we help people rediscover the ability to actually think deeply?
I think companies need to make space for that, whether it's employee conferences or like events that they set up that take them out of the work process. One of the things that I've also observed is people don't know what motivates them intrinsically. We're so used to being pumped with extrinsic motivation. So that overwhelm of information, it's much easier for me to deal with if I know what matters to me because I can ignore 99 point whatever percent of it. If I'm self-aware about what triggers me and when I go down a place that's not productive, I'm much better at creating good boundaries and having good conversations with people. Like, so good negotiation, good collaboration. It's about boundaries, understanding where my boundaries are and being able to communicate them in not a hostile way. I'm not telling you what to do, but this is what I will do and this is what I won't. I can't negotiate with a marshmallow. You never get to a conclusion with somebody who doesn't know what they want or where their boundaries are. So we don't spend enough time just exploring what's possible, what excites us, but it comes down from the top. If the top only cares about the balance sheet and growth and profitability, one, it's going to be short-term growth and profitability. And two, people are going to get eaten alive. There's structural things that need to change for that to happen. Like one company can't do it, but you can start calculating the value of your employees. What's the value of expertise? What's the value of somebody who costs maybe 3x, but can come in and solve a problem right away? Versus what we're doing now is rehiring younger employees over and over and over again, training them to do the same things the people we just fired knew how to do because they cost less, because we never see that asset side. We never see the value of having expertise. And so the people getting laid off are my age because we're too expensive and you can't see our impact.
Right. And it ends up in a ironic way, of course, costing much more in the long run.
I don't think CEOs should make as much as they do because there's no commitment. Like they make hundreds of millions of dollars for 3 years, so they have no long-term interest. Once you have $100 million, I can retire. There's disincentive. Stick with it and really care over the long term. There are exceptions.
Which is all the more reason that the work that you do is so invaluable.
The work that I'm really interested in doing is helping senior teams build strategies and governance that engages people at the end of the day, like brings people together around a shared mission, stops pitting people against each other. A lot of the time, I will say, if you have a really good community strategy, you're getting people on the same side of the table looking forward instead of sitting across from each other and picking each other apart. We're all so different from each other. If we want to pick each other apart, we can do that all day long. Get yourself an engaging strategy that everybody is excited about, and those issues go away. I guess the end of the day, I look at things and I'm like, why are things so miserable? They don't have to be. They can be amazing, but you need to release some control. Like you need to stop trying to make everything defined and work the way you want and in the time frame you want, and let go of the anxiety piece. and lean into the joy of the work and the meaning. And if it's meaningful, it'll be joyful.
I want to give you a chance to let people know how to find you and learn more about your work.
Yeah. Well, so my website is just engagedorgs.com. And I can be reached at rachel@engagedorgs.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Blue Sky.
Rachel, thanks so much for having taken the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.